Michael Sweet and his brother Robert founded the band Stryper in 1984, and from then into the early 1990s, that's about all we heard of from Michael Sweet. But in the mid-1990s, after Stryper disbanded the first time, Michael spread his wings and we heard his first solo album, that fans affectionately refer to simply as 1994, as the album was released on Benson Records in the spring of that year. Since then, whenever Stryper isn't doing much, which really is not that often, he finds time to record solo albums, and even less often he might have a solo performance. It's even rarer still that Sweet or even Stryper perform in Kentucky. Ironically, this big-time Christian hard rock band, or Sweet himself, is played more frequently in small Kentucky towns than the bigger ones. Last week I got the opportunity to talk with Sweet about the past, the present, and the future, but we don't talk much about Stryper. Instead, this interview is simply and mostly about Sweet himself.
Basically, Stryper, we just celebrated 40 years as a band. We did go our separate ways from 92 to 03. So technically, we haven't been together as a band for 40 years, but we're celebrating 40 years from our first release, Yellow and Black Attack. And we just wrapped up a celebratory tour, a celebration anniversary 40-year tour. And we had great turnouts, put on a great show. At least I hope we did. We certainly tried to. And we did a classic set in a more modern era 05 to 24 set. And the new album, When We Were Kings, that came out. You had to remind me about when it came out, because I couldn't have told you when it came out.
Friday the 13th.
We're in such a blur. Okay, we're in such a blur mode. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, and what we wanted to do with that album is again celebrate the past. The title "When We Were Kings" is referencing and reminiscing on and of the past, the glory days, so to speak, and in the best of ways, in a positive way. Just kind of looking back on, hey, remember what we did? We went to Japan when we were 21, and we did this and we did that, and all that cool stuff. So that's what that's about. A really cool album. And then I'm coming to perform, which is very cool as well.
Exactly right. And I want to talk a lot about your solo career, because I know you've been on a lot of podcasts and you've talked about Stryper a lot, but you probably haven't talked a lot about your solo work. And I want to get into that. You have played in Kentucky several times solo. The first time I ever saw you, I think, was in 1995 at the Ichthus Festival.
Sure.
You had just released the 94 album, I guess technically the first solo album, All This in Heaven Too, Someday, songs of that nature. And I remember they gave you a very short set in the middle of the afternoon. And I think that you even had to do your sound check as part of your 30-minute set. Do you remember much about that concert or that tour?
I do. I couldn't give you descriptive details, but I do very clearly remember that time period, leaving the band and taking some time off to focus on my family and get my priorities in order. And then stepping back into music with that album, Michael Sweet. It came out in 94. And I remember going out and touring. And, I did a tour with the band where we were headlining venues, and then we did some Christian festivals. And I just remember just being honest about it, my heart being broken a little bit about some of the things that I experienced at some of the Christian festivals, coming off of the heels of being in a band like Stryper that had broken so many barriers and done so many first, so to speak. I felt like there was almost a disrespect to some degree. You just mentioned in the middle of the afternoon and having a very short set and whatnot. And we experience that to this day, things like that. And it's not about us being put on a pedestal or having more than anybody else, or, being treated like we're gods or anything, because we're not. We're just simple guys who sin like everybody else, and who have shortcomings. And issues we're trying to work out, but it's more about just respect. I'm a stickler for that. You know, you've got to have respect for your peers and for people who have kind of blazed the trails. And you know, I see more of that in Christian music, just being honest, than I do in mainstream music. And I do remember, I have a lot of memories of things like that, sadly and unfortunately. But you know, I've moved on, and I'm still doing solo stuff. I do a lot of solo stuff. I enjoy it. It's an opportunity for me to kind of spread my wings a little bit and stretch out and do things a little different and experiment a little bit more and just try new things. And I love it.
Now, I think you have released 10 solo albums. Is that correct?
That is correct. Actually, uh, if you take into consideration the solo album that's already finished but not released, it's 11. I finished an inspirational album, I'm calling it. There's no title. It may be called The Master's Plan, possibly. That'll be coming out. I've been talking about it for a few years. It'll be coming out relatively soon. And that will be 11.
We all look forward to that. And I understand that solo album is going to be a lot different than maybe some of the more recent ones that you have done.
Very. What I did on that album musically is I pulled from influences musically for me when I was, you know, very young. So from the age of 5, I started playing. So there's even some influences in there with that. Like I love the band Spiral Staircase. I don't know if you remember them or not. I love you more today than yesterday. You know, and I love that stuff. And you're going to hear little bits and pieces of some of that style. It's broad. It's very broad, and it takes you on a ride for sure, musically and lyrically. Lyrically, it's more of a worship, inspirational album for sure.
What I wanted to do, I have 7 of your solo albums right here next to me. What I want to do is, in a kind of a random order, I'm going to hold it up the cover and sort of tell me like what comes to mind, what you remember about recording that.
Okay.
If you performed any of this live. So here's the first one.
Okay.
Not Your Suicide. What do you remember about this record?
Oh gosh, I remember that album being kind of coming off of the heels, the first solo album coming off of the heels of my wife passing. Not long after she passed in 2009, and that was released. I want to say it might have been 12 or 13. I'm not even sure the year. But regardless, that album, I remarried Lisa, who's my wife now. We've been married for 15 years. She's an angel sent from heaven, a wonderful, wonderful woman. And that album was made during that time, during that whole transition. So there's a lot of depth lyrically and musically too.
Gotcha. All right, here's the next one. I believe this was your second, Real.
Yes, that album, I was listening a lot to Melissa Etheridge and bands like that, you know, more acoustic driven rock. Don Henley, you know, I was just, for some reason, I was in this different place musically. And that album showcases more of that. It's more of an acoustic based album. And I really enjoyed doing that. Now, some people didn't get it because it was more acoustic based versus electric plugged in, a little more unplugged. And that's okay. But I think it's one of my favorite solo albums that I've ever done.
All right, so this one was the first album that you did solo, and I just give you kind of my memories of when this came out. It was in the spring of '94, and I was a subscriber to CCM magazine, and I remember getting you were on the cover, and you were back, and it had been, gosh, almost 6 years since Stryper had released or an album, and this was like, wow, he's back, and this was kind of a different sound, kind of almost, I don't know, like a Bryan Adams kind of sound to it, but still to this day, love this album. What are your thoughts? What are your memories about this album?
Yeah, you know, I've always loved that style of music, and I grew up on it. You know, bands like Def Leppard, Bryan Adams. I love that stuff. Arena rock, as they call it. And there's a side of me that loves to write that and loves to play that style. So that was my opportunity to break away from Stryper, which is more of the metal, chuggy guitar heavy style, and do something a little different, which was more what you hear on that album. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And it did very well. I mean, I was a little nervous and skeptical coming off of the heels of Stryper, because Stryper, the album Against the Law, by all standards, pretty much bombed. It didn't go gold. Every album prior to that had gone gold. We had a few platinum and multi-platinum albums. That album didn't go gold. It didn't really chart well. It didn't do very well for a number of reasons, in my opinion. So coming off of that, I was excited about something, but nervous at the same time. And I didn't know how it was going to be perceived or received. And once I released it, boom, it took off. And I think I had 5 #1 singles on that album, Christian charting singles. It sold very well, had a very successful tour and cover of many magazines. And it really made some noise. It was very nice.
All right, here's the next one. And I understand that Truth was sort of an album that you had an independent release first, and then it was picked up by Restless Records later on. It came out, I guess, early 2000s. And it seems like there had been kind of a break. You hadn't done anything for a while when this album came out.
Right. I had basically been working for the family business, which was a campground and cranberry bogs. So I would work the campground in the summer and then the bogs in the fall, and then take the winters off. It was a seasonal business. And I did that for a while. And I just basically thought and felt like, okay, I'm not doing music anymore. So I put all my gear in a closet. I sold some of it, gave some of it away. And I felt like, okay, this is what I'm doing from 96 to 2000 to 99. And then in 2000 is when I signed a deal with Restless, and we released that album, which was a re-recording of my original version of that album, released a year prior, called Truth, Blue Swirl. And some people have called that my best solo album. I don't know, but I have people come up to me all the time who say that's their favorite. And it's sad because that album kind of fell by the wayside and got put on a shelf because I released it on my own through snail mail. So no real release through a label. Then I signed a deal with Restless. They released it, but right after they released it, the week they released it, they went bankrupt. They closed their doors as a label.
Wow, I wasn't really.
So it didn't see the light of day, really,
That's something. All right, so here we go with 10. This was, I guess, one of your more recent solo albums. This came out, I think, right before COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And there's another one called One-Sided War that came out right before that. That's really good too.
Right. You can talk about both of those together if you'd like.
Okay. Both of those albums were released on a label called Rat Pack. And again, it was just an opportunity for me to try something different. I got tired of hearing people say, oh yeah, his solo stuff's good, but it's not like Stryper. It's not as heavy. It doesn't have the punch. And, just all these kinds of comments over the years. So I kind of rolled up my sleeves on those 2 albums and said, really? Okay. And that was my thinking going into it. Like, okay, let's do some heavy stuff here solo wise. And those are the results.
And I guess technically Reborn Again is considered a solo record too, because this was an album that became a Stryper album after a long hiatus, but then you came back and released it as the solo album that it was actually meant to be a few years ago.
Yeah, I wrote that album before Stryper got back together. The entire album, as a Stryper version and that version. And I had it wrapped up as a demo, and I was talking to a label called Big 3, and I was going to sign a deal with Big 3 and do another solo release, that album and other albums. And basically Stryper went and did a show, and I played that album for the guys, and they loved it and said, "Oh gosh, how great would it be if we get back together, if we did something like that?" And I suggested to them, "Well, why don't we make this a Stryper album?" And they loved the idea. We re-recorded it, released it under the name Stryper. And there you go. So, but technically it is a solo album originally.
Well, let's talk about your concert at Morehead State University. It's going to be December the 5th. It's a Thursday night. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. This is going to be a lot different than a Stryper concert. It's going to be just you in an acoustic guitar, I understand, more of a storyteller kind of concert. What are people going to expect to see that night?
Yeah, it's going to be me and an acoustic guitar. Hopefully I'll be plugged into some sort of system there. I gotta advance the show and talk to all the production guys first. But it's just going to be me playing songs and, like you said, talking. I might play a few songs and then tell stories about them, talk about the past, talk about how things came to be with that particular song or the band or this or that. And that's exactly what it's going to be. And I tell you what, those are my favorite shows. Because it feels like I'm sitting in somebody's living room and just hanging out with family. That's what it feels like to me. It's more personable and intimate, and I love that. When you do a Stryper show, a rock show, and it's loud and the lights are going and everyone's yelling, and after the show's over, everyone clears out. You're in and out. With something like this, though, it's just more of just a deeper personal experience that I personally love. And I don't get to do them too often like this, but when I do, I really enjoy it. Now, in terms of colleges, I don't usually play colleges, so I hope people show up. I don't know what's going on. I'm assuming it's open to the public. I don't know.
I know
I hope.
Right. They've been planning this for quite a while. I know that Greg Napier in Hazard talk. I think you know him. He and a guy by the name of Drew McNeil, who is with one of the Christian organizations there on campus. They have been planning this for almost a year now.
Wow.
And so hopefully there'll be a huge crowd, a lot of people. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Stryper fans there, but also people that are wanting to hear more about you and what's been going on with your life. I would have to think too, with 11 solo albums and 15 Stryper studio albums, coming out with a set list is going to be kind of a difficult thing to do.
It's so hard, and that goes for Stryper solo. It's very difficult because as you're going through, someone will shout out, "Oh, but what about that one?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one." But we're only contracted to play 90 minutes, and we've got 2.5 hours worth of material. Yeah, it's hard. But I'm gonna just go and play the songs that I feel I follow my heart with every set that I put together, and whatever I'm feeling in the moment, that's what I'll play.
Would it be safe to say this is a kind of a rare occurrence for you, or a rare solo date for you, because you probably don't do a whole lot of these?
I really don't. I mean, to give you an example, this year I haven't done any. It's been all Stryper, and I'm doing a Christmas show coming up in a little over a week. It's my 8th annual or 9th annual local Christmas show, full band. And then I'm doing an acoustic solo show 2 days later in Worcester, Mass. Then I'm going to, I'm performing at Morehead, and that's a week later. So I don't do them very often. It maybe on average, if you broke it up in the past 40 years, maybe 2 or 3 a year, not that many.
Well, we're coming to the end of the year, and 2025 is a brand new year. Can you kind of give us a hint of what we might expect to see next year with you, with Stryper, and everything else that's going on?
Well, I joked recently about breaking up and retiring, and that didn't go over too well. So I won't joke about that. I don't see retirement in the near future. I as long as I stay healthy. I had a bout with thyroid cancer, and I'm very proactive about going to the doctor and anything that I feel is wrong. And thank God I caught it early. But if I stay healthy and I'm here on earth and I can continue on, I'm going to continue on. And I don't see retirement until I'm gone, till I can't breathe anymore. And we have a year planned out with international dates with Stryper, a solo release, working on a documentary, trying to complete that. That'll probably come out in 26. I've got Iconic. We're finishing up that album. Maybe some shows next year for that. There's all kinds of stuff. If you look at the Michael Sweet Stryper calendar, it's filled up till the end of the year.
Wow. I appreciate you so much taking the time to talk to me and to preview the Morehead State concert. Again, it's December the 5th, and we look forward to seeing that. Michael, I'm going to give you the final word, and then I'll stop this and let you get back to whatever else you got going on today.
Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time, Philip, out of your schedule to talk to me. It always kind of boggles my mind that anyone wants to talk to me, so I appreciate it. And all the people out there listening who hear this and see this, come to the show. It's going to be an amazing show. It'll be very unique. It'll be special and certainly one of a kind. And I look forward to it. And I'm going to just tell stories and sing some songs and spend some time with you guys. We might even eat some pizza together or something. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But you guys, I'm looking forward to it. And I appreciate the fact that you all still want to come and see me perform. It's humbling, and I never take it for granted. And I'm very grateful and very appreciative, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, I'm going to get what's called a 2-shot. And usually when I'm interviewing somebody in person, it's a little bit easier, but it's a little bit kind of crazy to do it with kind of a Zoom interview here.
That's awesome.
But we can be talking about anything. So, when you're not doing music, what do you like to do in your spare time that's totally non-music related?
I'm a very simple guy. I mean, believe it or not, I really get a lot of enjoyment out of watering flowers. And my wife will say, "Did you just water those?" I'm like, "Yep, I did." I don't know what it is, but I love to go out and water flowers, and the neighbors walk by and talk to them, and I enjoy that. I bike ride. I've been riding my bike a lot lately. I like getting on it and just going and thinking about things. It's very therapeutic for me. But more importantly, and most importantly, is my music. That is my job and my ministry, but it's my hobby. And I just love doing it. It's like building a model car when I was 6 years old, writing a song. It's the same feeling. It's just peace and excitement built into one, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And that's what I still love doing.
Well, thanks for viewing. And again, the concert is Thursday night, December 5th at Button Auditorium, and we will work to have a link of where to buy tickets. Thanks for viewing.